The monitor screamed across the emergency bay the moment Amelia Grace turned blue, her throat swelling shut after a rare and violent reaction to medication. Jackson Carter, the hospital's celebrated surgeon, shoved the paramedic aside and barked that the man was nothing more than a field medic who had no business near his patient. But the anesthesia team was still 4 minutes out, and Amelia's oxygen was collapsing by the second, and Jackson kept fumbling with a locked emergency cabinet as if time itself would wait for his pride. Liam Hunter pulled a battered metal pen from his shirt pocket, twisted off the cap, and knelt beside the dying woman, about to make a decision that would freeze every person in that room with horror. Stay with this story until the end to learn whether that pen saved Amelia Grace or buried Liam Hunter's career forever. Rain had turned Boston into a slow-moving river of red taillights that morning, and Liam Hunter sat in the passenger seat of his ambulance answering a dispatch call to a corporate office tower downtown, where a senior executive had reportedly collapsed and stopped breathing normally. He had worked as a paramedic for 12 years, long enough to trust his instincts over the noise of any room, and long enough to know that most emergencies were decided in the first 90 seconds, not the 90th minute. Before the truck pulled out of the station, his phone buzzed once, a short message from his daughter's babysitter confirming she had arrived safely at school, and Liam allowed himself a single breath of relief before tucking the phone away and turning back to the road. Inside the glass tower, Amelia Grace was chairing a meeting about her company's newest airway device, a product built to save lives in exactly the kind of emergency she never imagined she would face herself. Her chief operating officer, Evelyn Madison, slipped her a small white tablet under the table, whispering that it was the same headache medication Amelia always kept in her drawer. Within minutes, Amelia's skin erupted in hives, her lips darkened, and her blood pressure began to fall as panic spread through the boardroom faster than anyone could think clearly. When Liam arrived, he recognized anaphylaxis immediately, administered epinephrine by protocol, secured her airway with supplemental oxygen, and called for an emergency transport before Evelyn had even finished explaining what happened. Evelyn insisted, almost too forcefully, that they take Amelia specifically to Sterling Memorial, the hospital that partnered closely with her company, even though a nearer facility could have gotten her stabilized faster. Liam had learned long ago that panic spread faster than any illness, and he moved through the chaos of the office lobby with the same unhurried focus he brought to every call, checking her pulse, her airway, and her color before anyone else in the room had finished reacting to what they were seeing. His partner cleared a path through frightened employees, while Liam knelt beside Amelia, speaking to her in a low, steady voice even though she could not yet answer him. In the back of the ambulance, Amelia surfaced from unconsciousness for a few seconds and noticed the pen Liam was using to jot her vital signs, an old, unremarkable thing that seemed strangely out of place in his gloved hand. She asked, in a voice barely above a whisper, why a man like him still carried something so worn and outdated. Liam told her simply that some objects mean nothing to the world but everything to the person who remembers a promise attached to them, and before she could ask what he meant, her airway began closing again with alarming speed. He radioed ahead, warning the receiving hospital that this patient was trending toward a scenario paramedics feared most, an airway they could neither intubate nor ventilate through conventional means. The voice on the other end confirmed that Jackson Carter himself would be waiting in the emergency department. What Liam did not know was that Jackson had already received a private call from Evelyn Madison minutes earlier, one that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with money. The ambulance doors burst open, and the gurney rolled into the trauma bay as Amelia's heart rhythm began sliding into dangerous territory. Liam rattled off every detail in seconds, the dose of epinephrine given, the exact time it was administered, and his growing certainty that her throat was closing faster than any of them anticipated. Jackson barely let him finish before ordering him to step back, reminding the room that the patient now belonged to the hospital, not to an ambulance crew. Ryan Connor, the emergency physician on duty, suggested preparing both a standard intubation kit and a surgical airway kit simultaneously, a reasonable precaution given how fast Amelia was deteriorating. Jackson dismissed the idea outright, claiming that prepping for an invasive procedure would only spread panic through the room without cause. He attempted intubation the traditional way, but Amelia's vocal cords had swollen almost completely shut, and the first attempt failed within seconds, her oxygen levels dropping further with every passing moment. Liam watched Jackson prepare to repeat the exact same failed technique, and he understood with total clarity that the window for a safe outcome had nearly closed. He warned everyone in the room, in plain and urgent language, that this had become a true cannot intubate, cannot ventilate emergency, the kind paramedics trained for but prayed never to see. Jackson exploded, shouting that Liam was nothing but a paramedic and had no authority to instruct a surgeon on how to do his job. Liam did not argue about titles or credentials. He simply insisted that someone open her airway from the front of her neck immediately, before it was too late for any argument to matter. Jackson hesitated, insisting they should wait for the anesthesia team to arrive and assume proper control of the situation. Ryan rushed toward the equipment locker containing the emergency surgical airway kit, only to discover the electronic lock refused to release, its access code disabled by a hospital software update earlier that week. A nurse sprinted off in search of a mechanical override key, but everyone in the room understood those seconds might be the difference between recovery and permanent brain damage. Amelia lost consciousness entirely, her monitor displaying oxygen numbers that made even hardened staff members go quiet with dread. Her heart rate slowed further, dragging the room's collective breath down with it. Liam glanced at the clock and understood, with the calm certainty that only experience provides, that waiting any longer guaranteed irreversible harm. He reached for a sterile scalpel resting on an open procedure tray nearby, the only tool within reach that could still make a difference. After locating the correct landmark on her throat, he instructed Ryan to hold her head steady while he prepared to act. Jackson grabbed his arm and ordered him to stop, his voice cracking with something closer to fear than authority. Liam answered quietly that Amelia no longer had time left for anyone's pride, his own included. He pulled the metal pen from his pocket, twisted it apart, and discarded the ink cartridge and spring, keeping only the hollow outer casing in his palm. He explained, quickly and without drama, that the casing would only serve as a temporary airway conduit once an opening had already been made, not as some reckless weapon to be jabbed blindly into her throat. As the monitor's alarm stretched into one long unbroken tone, Liam lowered the blade to Amelia's neck. He made a small, precise incision through the cricothyroid membrane using sterilized instruments, the same technique he had trained on countless times but never once needed to use on a real patient until now. He slid the hollow pen casing into the opening as a makeshift airway, steady hands moving with a discipline that betrayed none of the fear gripping everyone else in the room. Ryan improvised a connector, linking the casing to the oxygen supply using tubing salvaged from equipment already open on the tray. For a few unbearable seconds nothing seemed to change, and several people in the room silently feared they had already lost her. Liam checked the placement, adjusted the angle slightly, and instructed the team to ventilate slowly to avoid causing further injury to the fragile tissue. Then her chest began to rise. Her oxygen numbers climbed, first by fractions, then steadily, and her heartbeat began settling back into a rhythm that resembled life again. Jackson stood frozen, forced to watch the very procedure he had refused to prepare for save the woman he claimed to be protecting. The anesthesia team finally arrived and quickly replaced the improvised airway with a proper surgical tube, giving Amelia a stable path to breathe while doctors assessed the damage. She was upstairs for further evaluation, leaving behind a trauma bay full of shaken staff and one furious surgeon whose composure had visibly cracked. The instant the immediate danger passed, Jackson's tone shifted entirely, and he accused Liam of performing an unauthorized invasive procedure completely outside the bounds of his job. He ordered hospital security to detain Liam and confiscate the pen as evidence, as though the object itself were the crime rather than the delay that had made it necessary. Liam offered no resistance, asking only whether Ryan believed Amelia still had a real chance at a full recovery. Ryan confirmed that oxygen had been restored quickly enough to significantly reduce the risk of lasting brain injury. Relief settled briefly over Liam's face before the weight of his likely unemployment settled back in. Jackson instructed every staff member present not to speak to reporters or attorneys about what had happened, a directive that struck several nurses as strange for a man who claimed innocence. One nurse, Violet Abigail, quietly mentioned that the resuscitation room's camera had recorded the entire event from start to finish. Jackson immediately demanded the technical department seal the footage, citing patient privacy as his justification. As guards escorted Liam out of the department, Hannah Elizabeth arrived, identifying herself as Amelia Grace's personal attorney. She asked directly who had saved her client's life. Jackson claimed the hospital's team had successfully managed the complication together, offering no names and no specifics. Ryan looked at Hannah as if he wanted to correct the record, but he said nothing in that moment. Liam was suspended from active duty before the day ended, pending a full investigation into his conduct. Within hours, the story circulating through the hospital painted him as a reckless paramedic who had stabbed a corporate executive in the neck with a pen. Nobody mentioned that Jackson had failed twice at intubation, or that he had refused to prepare a backup plan when warned repeatedly. That night, Liam returned to his small apartment and set the sealed evidence bag containing the pen casing down on his kitchen table, staring at it for a long time. He glanced at the small photograph tucked inside his wallet, worried quietly that he was about to lose the only steady income supporting his daughter. Still, he felt no regret for choosing Amelia's life over the safety of his professional record. In her recovery room at Sterling Memorial, still unable to speak because her airway was healing, Amelia reached for a small whiteboard and wrote a single question for the nurse standing beside her. "Where is the man with the pen?" Amelia could not speak yet, her throat still raw and swollen from the procedure that had saved her, but her mind remained sharp and focused despite everything her body had endured. Jackson visited her room and calmly presented himself as the physician who had led her entire resuscitation, speaking with the practiced confidence of a man rewriting history in real time. Amelia remembered his voice clearly, remembered him shouting at the paramedic to step back, remembered the suffocating panic of watching people hesitate while she could not breathe. She wrote a note demanding that Hannah obtain her full medical records, the emergency call logs, and every second of camera footage from that morning. Hospital administrators cited patient confidentiality and stalled, delaying every request Hannah filed on Amelia's behalf. Hannah soon discovered that the most critical portion of the camera footage had conveniently been marked as corrupted by a system error. Ryan met privately with Hannah and confirmed, without hesitation, that Liam Hunter was the one who made the decision that ultimately saved Amelia's life. He also revealed that the emergency airway cabinet had locked itself at the worst possible moment, a detail that struck him as far too convenient to be coincidence. Amelia requested to see Liam and he arrived at the hospital dressed plainly, keeping a respectful distance given the active investigation hanging over him. Using a small speech device, Amelia thanked him with words that trembled slightly under the strain of her healing throat. Liam refused to accept the label of hero, insisting that any responsible paramedic would have acted the same way once a patient ran out of time. Amelia asked why he had risked his entire career for a stranger he had known for less than an hour. He told her that a human life could never be measured by the rank of whoever happened to be standing closest when it mattered most. That sentence lodged itself in Amelia's mind, standing in sharp contrast to the culture of hierarchy and self-interest she had built her company around without fully realizing it. Hannah reported that the tablet Evelyn had given Amelia did not match the headache medication she normally took at all. Lab results confirmed the pill contained an ingredient Amelia had explicitly listed as a known allergen in her medical file. Evelyn denied any wrongdoing, suggesting a supplier must have mislabeled the packaging by mistake. Liam recalled that Evelyn had pushed hard for the ambulance to divert specifically to Sterling Memorial, even though another hospital sat considerably closer to the scene. That detail convinced Amelia this had never been a simple accident to begin with. Hannah dug further and discovered that Jackson held shares in a shell company quietly attempting to acquire Grace Medical Technologies, a purchase that would only succeed if Amelia lost her ability to run the business. Meanwhile, the company's board announced an emergency vote to grant Evelyn temporary control as chief executive, citing concerns over Amelia's health following the incident. The vote was scheduled to take place within 48 hours. Amelia understood that unless she acted immediately, she would lose her company before she was even well enough to leave her hospital bed. She wrote one final instruction for Hannah before drifting into exhausted sleep: find that footage and protect Liam before someone forces him into silence. The professional licensing board summoned Liam to answer for his actions, weighing whether to revoke his ability to work as a paramedic entirely. Jackson submitted a formal report claiming Liam had acted recklessly and endangered the patient through unauthorized intervention. The report conveniently omitted his own failed intubation attempts and his refusal to prepare a surgical airway when Ryan first recommended it. Liam could have used the hearing to accuse Jackson directly, but instead he chose to lay out the timeline of events exactly as it happened, without embellishment or blame. Several board members questioned whether using the casing of a pen constituted an acceptable medical improvisation under any circumstance. Liam acknowledged it was a last resort, only attempted after standard airway methods had failed and the proper surgical kit remained locked and inaccessible. He explained plainly that the pen itself performed no miracle. What saved Amelia was recognizing, in time, the exact moment a situation demanded an emergency surgical airway rather than further hesitation. One board member asked whether he had ever practiced the exact improvisation he used that day, and Liam admitted he had not, but that his training had prepared him to recognize the underlying problem long before he ever needed to solve it with whatever tool happened to be within reach. While the hearing proceeded, Hannah searched for a backup copy of the corrupted camera footage stored somewhere outside the hospital's internal servers. Violet Abigail mentioned that the recording system typically synced automatically to the equipment manufacturer's remote server before anything got deleted locally. Hannah obtained a legal order compelling the manufacturer to preserve and release that backup immediately. The recovered footage clearly showed Jackson physically blocking Liam, repeating a failed technique twice, and stalling deliberately while Amelia's condition worsened by the second. Unfortunately, the audio from the first several minutes had somehow been separated from the video entirely. Without that audio, Jackson could still claim he had personally directed Liam through the entire procedure. Liam remembered that ambulances automatically recorded audio during patient handoff, a detail most people outside emergency services rarely knew existed. That recording would contain every warning he had given and Jackson's infamous line dismissing him as nothing but a paramedic. Before Hannah could retrieve it, the ambulance in question was reported to have lost its stored data due to what officials called a maintenance malfunction. Liam returned to his station to investigate personally and found an unfamiliar man attempting to remove the storage unit directly from the vehicle. The man fled the moment he realized he had been spotted. Liam pursued him without resorting to unnecessary force, simply cutting off his escape route and holding him in place until police arrived on the scene. The intruder's phone contained messages sent from an untraceable prepaid number, instructing him to erase the data before the upcoming hearing. Hannah traced the payment behind that phone number back to the same shell company connected to Evelyn Madison. From her hospital bed, Amelia insisted on joining the board meeting remotely through video, determined not to let her absence hand the company over without a fight. Evelyn feigned concern, urging Amelia to rest and let someone healthier take the reins temporarily. Amelia realized Evelyn wanted far more than a title. She wanted to sell the company's breakthrough airway technology directly to a rival corporation before anyone could stop her. That very technology, bitterly enough, was the exact device that should have been sitting unlocked in the emergency cabinet the night Amelia nearly died. Hannah received an anonymous message shortly after, warning that if Amelia continued digging into the truth, her next allergic reaction would happen with no one like Liam anywhere nearby to save her. Against medical advice, Amelia left the hospital early to attend the board's emergency session in person, unwilling to let anyone else decide her company's fate from a distance. She was still visibly weak, her voice hoarse, a small bandage still covering the incision at the base of her throat. Liam did not accompany her as a bodyguard or as anyone's hero. Hannah had simply asked him to attend as a witness who could speak to what actually happened. Before the meeting began, Amelia asked Liam what frightened him most about the possibility of losing his license. He admitted that his greatest fear was no longer being able to provide for his family, and the thought that his daughter might someday believe he had done something wrong. Amelia told him that one day, his daughter would understand that her father chose to save a stranger's life, even when no one else in that room was willing to stand beside him. It was the last time either of them mentioned his daughter throughout the entire ordeal. The meeting opened with Evelyn formally requesting Amelia's suspension, citing her fragile health as sufficient reason to step aside. She presented the acquisition offer as a responsible way to protect shareholders from further instability. Several board members leaned toward accepting the deal, drawn by the promise of immediate financial return. Amelia requested that the emergency room footage be played for the entire board without delay. Jackson arrived unexpectedly with the hospital's legal counsel at his side, prepared to fight back. He claimed the footage had been manipulated and insisted Liam had only acted under his direct supervision. Hannah countered with precise timestamp data pulled directly from Amelia's bedside monitor, proving beyond doubt how long Jackson had delayed treatment. Ryan confirmed under oath that Jackson had refused to prepare a surgical airway kit despite being warned multiple times that the situation demanded it. Jackson pivoted, attacking Liam instead, emphasizing that he had used an object never approved for any medical purpose. Liam stood, placed the sealed pen casing on the conference table, and addressed the room with quiet composure. He explained that the pen had never been his chosen instrument. It was simply the only tool available during the few minutes when proper equipment sat locked and a woman was actively dying. He asked the board a single-pointed question: which was more dangerous, an imperfect tool used at exactly the right moment, or a perfect system left locked because the people with real power refused to act? That question landed hard, and several board members began openly questioning the leadership decisions that had brought them to this point. Hannah then revealed evidence showing Evelyn had quietly changed Amelia's medication supplier just 3 days before the incident occurred. Evelyn denied it outright, attempting to shift blame onto an assistant who had no actual authority over such decisions. Amelia discovered the digital approval signature for that change had originated from Evelyn's personal computer, not from any authorized company device. Even so, the evidence still fell short of proving Evelyn had intentionally set out to harm Amelia. Just as the board prepared to move forward with the vote, Hannah received the fully restored, unedited audio recovered from the ambulance's backup storage drive. The recording filled the room with Jackson Carter's own voice. "Just let her lose consciousness. Once anesthesia arrives, none of this will be our responsibility anymore." The recording continued playing, capturing every moment Liam had repeatedly demanded an emergency surgical airway while precious seconds slipped away. Then came a second voice, unmistakably Evelyn's, speaking to Jackson in a call placed before Amelia had even arrived at the hospital that morning. Evelyn told him not to rush things if Amelia's oxygen levels started dropping too fast. In exchange, Jackson would receive a lucrative medical advisory position and a substantial financial payout once the company's sale finalized. Jackson panicked, shouting that the recording had to be fabricated somehow. Hannah produced a technical verification from the equipment manufacturer confirming the audio carried an encrypted signature that could not be altered without leaving a clear, permanent trace. Ryan submitted a copy of his original incident report, written before Jackson had pressured him to revise its contents. Violet confirmed openly that Jackson had personally ordered the camera footage deleted from hospital servers. Police officers entered the boardroom moments later carrying a warrant for Jackson's arrest on charges including conspiracy to cause harm, falsifying medical records, and destroying evidence. Evelyn attempted to slip out of the room quietly but was stopped and detained for further questioning as well. Amelia demanded the board immediately cancel the proposed acquisition, and her request was granted without objection. The vote to hand control to Evelyn was suspended on the spot. Amelia retained her position as chief executive, though the moment carried no triumph or celebration for her. She told the remaining board members that a company built to save lives could never survive if its own leadership was willing to sacrifice one for the sake of power. Liam's licensing hearing reconvened almost immediately once the new evidence became public record. The board concluded that he had acted during a genuine life-threatening emergency, possessed the proper training for the procedure he performed, and had no remaining safe alternative available to him. His full paramedic credentials were restored without condition. Sterling Memorial suspended several administrators connected to the scandal and committed publicly to reforming how emergency equipment was secured throughout the facility. Critical airway kits were switched from electronic locks to mechanical emergency access, ensuring no software failure could ever again stand between a patient and the equipment needed to save them. Liam declined a substantial financial reward Amelia offered him afterward. Instead, he asked only that her company fund proper emergency airway training for paramedics working in underserved communities across the region. Amelia agreed, but she had another proposal in mind as well. She wanted Liam to become Director of Emergency Response Training for Grace Medical Technologies, a role that would let his real-world experience shape the very devices meant to save lives in the field. Liam did not accept right away, unwilling to walk away entirely from the fieldwork that had defined his entire career for over a decade. Amelia suggested a hybrid arrangement instead, one where he would continue working select ambulance shifts each month while using his frontline experience to guide product design decisions. Liam agreed on one condition, insisting that every device the company built be tested first by the people who would actually use it in the field, not solely evaluated inside a conference room by executives far removed from real emergencies. Grace Medical Technologies launched a new initiative named after him, providing emergency airway kits, hands-on training, and simplified access systems to hospitals and clinics that had never been able to afford them before. Ryan joined the program as its lead medical advisor, bringing credibility and clinical insight to every stage of its development. Hannah remained closely involved, helping guide the company's broader efforts to restructure its leadership and rebuild trust after the scandal. Amelia never hesitated to publicly credit Liam as the man who saved her life, though he always insisted that Ryan and the nursing staff deserved equal recognition for what happened that day. Jackson lost his medical license entirely while awaiting trial for his role in the conspiracy. Evelyn faced formal charges connected to attempted poisoning, financial fraud, and obstruction of a federal investigation. Months passed, and Amelia made a full physical recovery, left with only a small, thin scar at the base of her neck as a permanent reminder of how close she had come to losing everything. Her relationship with Liam developed slowly, built through countless working sessions rather than any single dramatic gesture, and it never relied on gratitude alone to sustain it. Amelia came to deeply value his honesty, a quality rare among the people who typically surrounded someone in her position of power. Liam, in turn, discovered that behind the composed, unshakable executive was a woman who had been betrayed repeatedly by the very people she once trusted most completely. Neither of them rushed to name what was growing between them, but they began offering each other a kind of quiet trust that had been missing from both of their lives for a very long time. Amelia eventually had the cleaned pen casing mounted and framed as a keepsake, but Liam told her the story deserved something more meaningful than honoring an object. He said it should remind people never to stay silent when someone's life is running out of time. A year later, Grace Medical Technologies held a launch event for its next generation of emergency airway devices, engineered specifically from lessons learned that terrible morning. The new design was intentionally simple, quick to open, and impossible to lock down electronically during any true emergency, no matter what software failure might occur elsewhere in a hospital. Liam stood on stage that day as the company's director of field training, a role he had never once imagined for himself 12 years earlier. Amelia introduced him not as a man who was, in her words, just a paramedic, but as someone who recognized the true value of a human life at the exact moment people with far more power chose to look away instead. Liam kept his remarks brief, telling the audience that rank, degrees, and job titles all carried real meaning, but none of them should ever outweigh the responsibility to act correctly when a moment demanded it most. He did not go into detail about his family, saying only that everyone in that room had someone waiting for them to come home safely at the end of the day. After the ceremony, Amelia handed Liam the fully restored pen, its metal casing polished until it gleamed under the stage lights. He slipped it back into his shirt pocket exactly where it had always belonged. Amelia asked, half smiling, whether it could still write like an ordinary pen. Liam tested it on a scrap of paper, wrote out the name of the training program, and smiled quietly as he admitted that the things which once saved a life could sometimes go on to begin an entirely new story of their own. The two of them walked out of the hall together, no longer separated by the gap between a powerful executive and an overlooked paramedic from two entirely different worlds. They moved forward instead as two people who had learned, through betrayal, danger, and quiet judgment from strangers, exactly how to trust again. Sterling Memorial eventually adopted the Hunter Airway Initiative as a standard part of its own staff training, requiring every physician, nurse, and paramedic who rotated through its emergency department to complete the course regardless of rank or years of experience. Ryan often taught the sessions himself, opening each class with the same recording the board had once listened to in stunned silence, reminding every new trainee exactly what happens when hesitation is allowed to outlast urgency. Hannah, who had spent months untangling the fraud within Grace Medical Technologies, stayed on as general counsel, determined to make certain no future leader could ever again mistake a boardroom decision for a medical one. Amelia rebuilt her executive team from the ground up, choosing people who had proven their integrity under pressure rather than simply their loyalty to whoever held power at the time. It was never the uniform, the title, or the value of the tool in someone's hand that decided who was capable of saving a life. What truly defined a hero was knowledge, courage, and the willingness to act in the one moment when every second still remaining might be the very last one that mattered.